The bullet holes in the snow told Carter Williams everything he needed to know. This wasn't an accident. The overturned police cruiser was half buried in the Colorado blizzard, steam rising from its shattered engine. Inside, Officer Joanna Hayes was dyeing her lips blue, her badge number the last thing she whispered before collapsing into his arms. But when his German Shepherd Rex saw her face, the dog's reaction sent ice through Carter's veins. Rex knew her, and that impossible recognition would unravel a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I need you to do something for me. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens next will leave you speechless. And please drop a comment below telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single moment of what Carter, Joanna, and Rex went through that winter night. Now let's begin. The wind screamed across the Colorado plains like a wounded animal hurling snow against the windshield of Carter Williams's pickup truck with such force that the wipers could barely keep up. It was the kind of blizzard that turned roads into white tunnels where the headlights reflected back at you like you were driving through a cloud, and every instinct told you to turn around and go home. But Carter wasn't turning around. "Easy, boy," he murmured to Rex, his German Shepherd, who sat in the passenger seat with his ears pinned back, whining softly. The dog's anxiety wasn't helping Carter's own nerves. He'd lived in Colorado for 8 years now, ever since he'd left the Army and bought the small farmhouse outside of Ridgemont, and he'd seen his share of winter storms. But this one was different. Meaner. The kind that killed people who got caught in it unprepared. He'd only driven into town because Benny, his 10-year-old son, had insisted they were out of his favorite cereal. Carter had tried to explain that the storm was coming, that they could wait until tomorrow. But Benny had those big brown eyes, his mother's eyes, and Carter had never been able to say no to those eyes. So here he was at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday in January, crawling through a blizzard with 2 bags of groceries in the back, and a dog who seemed to sense something was very, very wrong. The radio crackled with static, then a voice broke through. "Highway 34 is now closed. Multiple accidents reported. All residents advised to shelter in place." "Great," Carter muttered, turning down Old Creek Road, the shortcut that would get him home faster. The truck's wheels slipped on ice, and he corrected carefully, his medic training kicking in. Even here, steady hands, steady breathing, focus on what you can control. Rex's whining grew louder. "I know, buddy. Almost home. We'll get you and Benny both fed, and we can ride this thing out by the fire." The dog's ears suddenly perked up, and he turned his head sharply to the right toward the ravine that ran alongside the road. "What is it?" Rex barked, a sharp, urgent sound that Carter had learned to trust. The dog had been through something before Carter adopted him from the Denver shelter 18 months ago. The rescue workers had been vague about his history, saying only that he'd been traumatized and needed a patient owner. Carter had seen that same haunted look in plenty of guys coming back from deployment, so he'd brought Rex home, and the two of them had healed together slowly. But right now, Rex wasn't acting traumatized. He was acting like a working dog. Okay, Carter said, slowing the truck. "What do you—" Then he saw it. Through the curtain of snow barely visible 20 feet down the embankment was the unmistakable shape of a vehicle on its side. The roof lights distinctive even when dark told him it was a police cruiser. "Jesus," Carter breathed, already pulling over. He killed the engine and grabbed his heavy coat from the back seat. "Stay here, Rex." But Rex was already scrambling over the center console, barking frantically at the door. "Fine, come on." The cold hit Carter like a physical blow when he opened the door. The temperature had to be below 0, and the wind chill made it feel like the skin was being stripped off his face. Rex bounded into the snow, already plowing toward the ravine, and Carter followed, pulling out his phone to call 911. No signal. Of course there wasn't. He half ran, half slid down the embankment, his boots sinking into snow up to his knees. The cruiser was a mess. The front end was crumpled against a tree. The driver's side door caved in spiderweb cracks across the windshield. Steam was still rising from under the hood, which meant this had happened recently. Very recently. Rex reached the passenger side first and started pawing at the window, barking with an intensity Carter had never heard from him before. "Easy, boy. Let me—" Carter wiped the snow off the window and peered inside. His heart stopped. There was someone in there. A woman in a police uniform slumped against the steering wheel, blood trailing from a cut above her eyebrow. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as the snow around them. "Hey!" Carter shouted, banging on the window. "Can you hear me?" No response. His training kicked in instantly. He was back in Kandahar triaging wounded soldiers under fire, his hands steady even when his mind was screaming. Check airway breathing circulation. Get them stable. Get them out. The passenger door was wedged shut, buckled from the impact. Carter braced his boot against the frame and pulled with everything he had. The metal groaned, resisted, then finally gave way with a shriek. Rex immediately jumped into the vehicle, pressing his nose against the woman's neck. "Out, Rex! Out!" The dog reluctantly backed away, and Carter leaned in his fingers, finding the pulse point on her throat. Weak, thready, but there. "Okay, you're alive. That's good. Let's keep it that way." He quickly assessed her injuries. The head wound was bleeding, but not catastrophically, no obvious deformity suggesting broken bones, but her core temperature was dangerously low. Hypothermia. If he didn't get her warm soon, the crash wouldn't matter, because she'd freeze to death. "I'm going to get you out," he said, even though she couldn't hear him. Talking to patients was automatic, a habit from his medic days. "You're going to be okay." He reached across her to unbuckle the seatbelt, and that's when he saw it, her nameplate. Hayes. And below it her badge number, 247. As if she could sense his presence, her eyes fluttered open. They were gray, unfocused, struggling to find him in the darkness. Hey, stay with me," Carter said, cupping her face gently. "What's your name?" Her lips moved barely a whisper. "Officer Hayes, badge 247. "Okay, Officer Hayes, I'm Carter. I'm going to get you out of here. Can you move your legs?" She tried, managed a slight movement, then her eyes rolled back. No, stay awake," Carter said sharply, but she was already unconscious again. No time. He had to move her now. He positioned himself carefully, sliding one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted. She was heavier than she looked, probably about 140 pounds, all of it dead weight. Carter grunted, adjusted his grip, and began the slow, agonizing climb back up the ravine. Rex ran ahead, then back, then ahead, again barking encouragement or alarm. Carter couldn't tell which. The snow was falling so thick now, he could barely see 5 feet in front of him. His boots slipped twice, and each time his heart lurched with the fear of falling, of dropping her, of failing. "Come on, Carter," he muttered to himself. "You've carried bigger guys farther than this. Move." By the time he reached his truck, his arms were shaking and his lungs were burning from the cold air. He managed to get the back door open and laid Officer Hayes across the back seat as gently as he could. Rex immediately jumped in beside her, curling against her body like he was trying to share his warmth. "Good boy." Carter gasped, then slammed the door and stumbled to the driver's seat. The engine roared to life, thank God, and he cranked the heat to maximum. His farmhouse was only 3 miles away. 3 miles through the worst blizzard he'd ever seen. He could make it. He had to make it. The drive was a nightmare. Twice the truck slid sideways, the back end fishtailing on ice. Once he almost went into the ditch on the opposite side of the road. But muscle memory and sheer stubbornness kept him going, kept the wheels steady, kept them moving forward. When the farmhouse finally appeared through the snow, a dark shape with one lit window where Benny was surely watching TV. Carter almost sobbed with relief. He parked as close to the front door as he could, and killed the engine. "Benny!" he shouted the moment he was inside. "Benny, I need you." His son appeared at the top of the stairs, still in his pajamas, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Dad? What's—" I need you to get every blanket we have. Now, bring them to the living room." Benny's eyes went wide, but he nodded and disappeared. Good kid. Carter had raised him to respond in emergencies, not ask questions until later. Carter went back out, scooped Officer Hayes into his arms again, Rex following like a shadow, and carried her inside. He laid her on the couch and immediately started stripping off her wet uniform jacket. Benny came thundering down the stairs with an armful of blankets. "Dad, what happened?" "Is she?" "She's alive, but she's freezing. Help me get these blankets on her." Together they covered her in layers, tucking them around her body. Carter checked her pulse again, still weak, but maybe a little stronger. Her skin was ice cold to the touch. "Benny, go start some water boiling. We need to warm her up from the inside when she wakes up." "Okay." Benny started to leave, then turned back. "Dad, is she going to die?" Carter looked at his son, saw the fear there. The same fear that had been in Benny's eyes 2 years ago, when his mother had gotten sick, when the cancer had moved too fast for anyone to stop it. "No," Carter said firmly. "Not tonight. I promise." Benny nodded and ran to the kitchen. Rex, meanwhile, had planted himself next to the couch, his head resting on the edge of the cushion, his brown eyes fixed on Officer Hayes' face. The dog hadn't left her side since they'd found her. "What is it about her boy?" Carter murmured, stroking Rex's head. "What do you know that I don't?" The dog just whined softly, his tail thumping once against the floor. Carter sat back on his heels and really looked at the woman he'd rescued. Mid-30s maybe. Athletic build. Short dark hair plastered to her head from the snow. Even unconscious and half-frozen, there was something fierce about her face, something that suggested she didn't go down easy. The head wound had stopped bleeding, which was good. He cleaned it gently with a warm cloth, noting that it wasn't as deep as he'd feared. Probably wouldn't even need stitches. An hour passed. Then 2. Carter kept vigil, checking her pulse every 15 minutes, adjusting the blankets, making sure her breathing stayed steady. Benny had fallen asleep in the armchair, his head tilted at an angle that would give him a sore neck in the morning. Rex hadn't moved at all. The blizzard raged outside, shaking the windows, piling snow against the doors. Carter's phone still had no signal. They were cut off from the world, just the 4 of them, in this small farmhouse, waiting out the storm. It was close to midnight when Officer Hayes finally stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, confused, darting around the unfamiliar room. Carter saw the moment panic set in. She tried to sit up, tried to reach for something at her hip, where her weapon should have been. "Easy," Carter said softly, holding up his hands. "You're safe. You're in my home. I'm Carter Williams. I found you in your cruiser down by Old Creek Road. You crashed in the blizzard." She stared at him, breathing hard, her hand still reaching for the gun that wasn't there. Then her gaze shifted, and she saw Rex. The transformation was instant and inexplicable. Her face went white, whiter than it had been from the cold. Her eyes widened, filling with something that looked like shock or recognition or grief. Her lips parted, and she made a sound that was half gasp, half sob. "No," she whispered. "No, that's impossible." Carter frowned. "What's impossible?" But she wasn't looking at him anymore. She was looking at Rex, and Rex was looking back at her with his tail wagging slowly, his whole body trembling with what looked like joy. "Where?" Her voice was hoarse, broken. "Where did you get this dog?" Carter blinked. Of all the questions he'd expected. "Who are you?" "Where am I? What happened?" This wasn't one of them. "I adopted him from a shelter in Denver about 18 months ago," he said slowly. "They said he'd been through some kind of trauma that he needed." "What shelter?" She interrupted, her eyes never leaving Rex. "Which one? When exactly?" "The Rocky Mountain Rescue Center. In July 2 years ago." "Why?" "What's Officer Hayes made a sound that was definitely a sob this time. She reached out with a shaking hand, and Rex immediately moved closer, pressing his head into her palm. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Bruno. Oh my God, Bruno, is it really you?" The dog's tail wagging intensified. He licked her hand, whined, and pushed harder against her touch, like he was trying to merge with her. Carter felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Wait, what did you just call him?" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she ran her hands over Rex's head, his ears, his neck, like she was confirming he was real. "His name is Bruno," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "He was my husband's canine partner. He went missing 2 years ago during—" She stopped, her face crumbling. "During the shooting that killed my husband." The room went very, very quiet. Carter sat back, his mind racing. Rex Bruno had been a police canine, had belonged to this woman's husband. The timeline matched. The trauma matched. But how had a police dog ended up in a shelter with no records, no identification, no way to trace him back to his handler? "Officer Hayes," Carter said carefully, "I think you need to tell me what happened 2 years ago." She looked at him, then really looked at him for the first time, and Carter saw something in her eyes that made his old combat instincts flare to life. It was the look of someone being hunted. Someone who'd seen things they weren't supposed to see. "It's Joanna," she said quietly. "And what happened 2 years ago? That's why someone just tried to kill me tonight." Before Carter could respond, before he could even process that statement, Rex's head snapped toward the window. His ears went flat, and a low rumbling growl built in his chest, a sound Carter had never heard him make before. Outside, barely audible over the wind, was the sound of an engine. Someone was coming up the driveway. At midnight, in the middle of a blizzard. Joanna's face went white again. "Did anyone see you rescue me?" she asked urgently. "Did anyone know you were bringing me here?" "No, I don't think—" "Then we have a problem," she said, trying to sit up despite her obvious weakness. "Because whoever just arrived, they're not here to help." Carter moved to the window, carefully pulling back the curtain just enough to see out. Through the snow, he could make out a dark SUV pulling to a stop behind his truck. No lights, no sirens. Just a vehicle that had followed their tracks through the storm. A vehicle that had no good reason to be here. The driver's door opened and a figure stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a sheriff's department jacket. Carter's blood ran cold when he saw the man's face illuminated by the porch light. Because he recognized him, Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez, the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. A man who'd been at every community event, every fundraiser, every city council meeting for the past decade. A pillar of the community. And according to the look of absolute terror on Joanna Hayes's face, a man who'd just come to finish what he'd started. Carter let the curtain fall back into place and turned to Joanna. "Okay," he said quietly. "I think it's time you told me everything." Joanna's eyes locked onto Carter's, and in that moment, he saw the full weight of what she'd been carrying. It was the same look he'd seen in mirrors after he came back from deployment, the haunted knowledge that the world wasn't what everyone else believed it to be. "My husband's name was David Hayes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Detective David Hayes. 2 years ago, he and Bruno were investigating a drug trafficking operation that was moving product through 3 counties. Big operation. Military-grade organization. David knew something was wrong with how the investigation was being handled. Evidence kept disappearing. Witnesses recanted. Arrests didn't stick. Rex Bruno pressed closer to her, and she absently stroked his head, her fingers moving through his fur like she was remembering something precious. He started digging where he wasn't supposed to dig. Started looking at people he wasn't supposed to look at. Her voice cracked. He found bank records, offshore accounts. He found proof that the operation wasn't just being protected, it was being run by people inside the department. Carter felt his jaw tighten. How high did it go? All the way to the top. She looked toward the window, where somewhere beyond the curtain, Sheriff Rodriguez waited. David told me he had enough evidence to bring down at least 6 officers, maybe more. He was going to turn it all over to the FBI. He'd already made contact with an agent in Denver. But he never got the chance, Carter said quietly. No. The word came out broken. They called him to a supposed drug bust on the north side. Abandoned warehouse. When he got there with Bruno... She stopped, closed her eyes. They ambushed him. Made it look like a shootout with dealers. David died. Bruno disappeared. The evidence David had collected was never found. And they ruled it a clean shooting. Hero cop killed in the line of duty. Her laugh was bitter. They gave him full honors. 21 gun salute. The whole department turned out. And I stood there at his funeral knowing that at least some of the men carrying his casket had put him in it. Outside, a car door slammed. Heavy footsteps crunched through the snow toward the porch. Carter moved away from the window, his mind working through tactical options. His son was asleep upstairs. A wounded officer on his couch. A killer cop outside his door. And a blizzard that meant no backup was coming. Why did they come after you tonight? He asked. Because I didn't stop. Joanna tried to sit up fully now, grimacing with pain. I spent 2 years working my way back into the department, playing the grieving widow, letting them think I was broken. But I was collecting evidence, building the case David started. And 3 days ago, I found it. Found what? Proof. Hard evidence. Recordings of Rodriguez and his crew discussing shipment routes, payment schedules, everything. I encrypted it and sent it to the FBI agent David had contacted. I was supposed to meet with federal prosecutors tomorrow morning. She looked at Carter with haunted eyes. But someone found out. They ran me off the road tonight. If you hadn't found me. A knock at the door interrupted her. 3 measured raps that somehow sounded more like a threat than a greeting. Bruno's growl deepened. The hackles on his neck rose. Stay here, Carter said. Don't make a sound. Carter, you can't open that door. You don't know what he's... I know exactly what he is. Carter's voice was calm, steady, the same tone he'd used when talking soldiers down from panic attacks. But if I don't answer, he'll know something's wrong. Trust me. He didn't wait for her response. He moved through the living room, stepping carefully around the spots where the floorboards creaked, and stopped at the front door. Through the frosted glass, he could see Sheriff Rodriguez's silhouette, tall, imposing, patient. Carter took a breath, put his hand on the doorknob and opened it. The cold hit him first, then the size of the man. Rodriguez was 6'3", at least broad across the shoulders, with the kind of physical presence that usually made people step back. His face was weathered, late 50s maybe, with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that were currently scanning Carter with casual interest. Evening, Rodriguez said, his voice deep and friendly. Sorry to bother you so late. I'm Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez. I know who you are, Sheriff. Carter kept his tone neutral, polite. What can I do for you? Well, I'm out looking for one of my officers. Female officer last seen heading down Highway 34 before the storm hit. Her GPS signal cut out somewhere around Old Creek Road. Rodriguez smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's right near here, isn't it? That's the road I take into town. Yes. You happen to see anything unusual on your way home tonight? Accident, maybe disabled vehicle? Carter held the man's gaze without blinking. Every instinct he'd developed in combat was screaming that this was a predator assessing prey. Just came straight home from the grocery store, Sheriff. Visibility was pretty bad. Why, your officer in trouble. We're just concerned is all. Rodriguez's eyes drifted past Carter's shoulder, trying to see into the house. Mind if I come in? Getting cold out here? Actually, I do mind. Carter's voice stayed polite but firm. My son's asleep upstairs and I don't like waking him. But if you want to leave me your card, I'll call you if I hear anything. For just a second, one fraction of a moment, something dark flashed across Rodriguez's face. Then the friendly mask slipped back into place. Of course. Family first. I respect that. He reached into his jacket, and Carter's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, where his service weapon would have been if he still carried one. But Rodriguez only pulled out a business card. You call me if you see or hear anything. We take care of our own. I'm sure you do, Sheriff. Rodriguez held out the card, and Carter had to step forward to take it. As their hands met, Rodriguez's grip tightened just slightly, not enough to be obvious, but enough to send a message. Nice place you got here, Mr. Williams. Quiet. Isolated. Good place to raise a kid. His eyes locked onto Carter's. Safe as long as everyone minds their own business. Carter pulled his hand back slowly. I've always been good at minding my business, Sheriff. Glad to hear it. Rodriguez turned to leave, then paused. Oh, one more thing. You got a dog, don't you? I heard barking when I pulled up. Carter's blood went cold, but his face stayed neutral. German Shepherd, rescue dog. He barks at everything in storms like this. Funny thing about that. Rodriguez looked back over his shoulder. The officer we're looking for, her husband, used to have a canine partner. German Shepherd. Went missing a couple years back during a tragic incident. Would be quite a coincidence if your dog turned out to be that dog, wouldn't it? The threat was barely veiled now. Dogs are pretty common, Sheriff, especially German Shepherds. True enough. Rodriguez smiled that empty smile again. Well, you have a good night, Mr. Williams. Stay warm. Stay safe. He walked back to his SUV, taking his time, his boots leaving deep prints in the snow. Carter watched until the vehicle's taillights disappeared into the storm, then shut and locked the door. His hands were shaking. He'd faced enemy combatants in Kandahar. He'd performed surgery in the back of moving Humvees while under fire. He'd carried wounded men through minefields. But standing in his own home facing a corrupt cop who'd just threatened his son, his family, that was a different kind of terror. He knows. Joanna's voice came from behind him. She'd managed to stand leaning heavily on the arm of the couch. He knows I'm here, or he suspects it. That's why he mentioned Bruno. Carter turned to face her. How would he know I covered our tracks? There's no way. He's been doing this for 20 years, Carter. He knows how to hunt people. And now he knows you exist. You and Benny. Her face was pale with more than just the cold. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to drag anyone else into this. Too late for sorry. Carter moved to the window, carefully checking the driveway. No vehicles. But that didn't mean Rodriguez was gone. Tell me about the evidence you sent to the FBI. When are they coming? The agent I contacted, Special Agent Morrison, was supposed to arrive in Denver tomorrow morning. I was supposed to meet him at the Federal Building at 10 a.m. She checked her watch, winced. That's in 9 hours. But I don't think we're going to make it to that meeting. Why not? Because Rodriguez won't wait that long. He can't afford to. If I'm alive tomorrow morning, if I testify, his entire operation collapses. Everyone goes to prison. He loses everything. She met Carter's eyes. He's going to come back, tonight, with enough men to make sure there are no witnesses. The words hung in the air between them. Benny. Carter's first thought was of his son asleep upstairs, completely unaware that his father had just painted a target on their home. Then we leave, Carter said. Now, we take Benny, we take my truck, and we drive to the nearest FBI office. In this storm, we wouldn't make it 5 miles, and Rodriguez probably has men watching the roads anyway. Joanna shook her head. We're trapped here until morning. Then we defend. Carter's training kicked in, his mind already mapping the house's defensive positions. This place is solid. Wood frame, good sight lines. I've got weapons. How many? Hunting rifle, shotgun, my old service pistol. Against how many men do you think Rodriguez can bring? Carter didn't answer. They both knew the numbers didn't favor them. A sound from the stairs made them both turn. Benny stood there clutching his blanket, his hair mussed from sleep, his eyes wide and frightened. "Dad? Why was the sheriff here? I heard talking." Carter's heart broke a little. He'd promised himself when Sarah died that he'd protect their son from everything. Keep him safe. Let him be a kid. And now here they were with danger literally at their doorstep. "Come here, buddy." Carter held out his arms, and Benny came down the stairs and into his father's embrace. "Everything's okay. The sheriff was just checking on people because of the storm." "Is the lady okay?" Benny looked at Joanna with curious eyes. "Is she still sick?" "I'm better, thanks to you and your dad," Joanna said softly. "You helped save my life." "Cool." Benny smiled a little, then his expression turned serious again. "Dad, are we in danger?" God, the kid was too smart for his own good. Too perceptive. Sarah used to say Benny could read a room better than most adults. Carter looked at his son and made a decision. No more lies. No more protecting him from reality. If they were going to survive this night, Benny needed to understand what was happening. "Yeah, buddy, we might be. The sheriff? He's not a good man. And Officer Hayes here has information that could put him in prison, so he might try to stop her from sharing that information. By hurting us. Maybe." Benny was quiet for a moment, processing this. Then he looked up at his father with those serious brown eyes. Like the bad guys in Afghanistan. Carter had told Benny some stories about his deployment, sanitized versions. Kid-friendly explanations of why Daddy had nightmares, sometimes why loud noises made him flinch. But Benny had understood in his own way that there were people in the world who did terrible things. "Yeah," Carter said quietly. "Like that." "Okay." Benny nodded, then looked at Joanna. "Then we should help her. Mom would have wanted us to help her." The simple certainty in his son's voice nearly undid Carter. Sarah would have wanted them to help. Sarah had always been the one to take in strays to feed the homeless guy who hung around the grocery store to volunteer at the shelter. Sarah had believed in doing the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. "Yeah," Carter said, his voice rough. "Yeah, she would have." Joanna was crying again silently, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to do this. Either of you. I can leave. I can lead them away from here." "In your condition, you'd be dead in an hour," Carter said bluntly. "And they'd probably still come back to make sure I stay quiet." "No. We're in this together now." Bruno moved to Joanna's side, pressing against her leg. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of what was happening, his body tense and alert. Carter looked at the three of them, the wounded cop, the traumatized dog, his brave son, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. It was the same weight he'd felt every time he'd led a patrol in hostile territory. Lives depending on his decisions. "Okay," he said. "Here's what we're going to do. Benny, I need you to go pack a bag. Clothes, your medication, your inhaler. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Then I need you to go down to the basement. You remember where the emergency supplies are. Buy the water heater." "Right. Get the camping gear ready. Sleeping bag, flashlights, batteries. If things go bad up here, you're going to hide down there with Bruno until it's safe." Benny's face fell. "I want to help fight." "You will help fight. By staying alive. By being smart. By doing exactly what I tell you." Carter gripped his son's shoulders. "I need you to be brave, Benny. Can you do that?" Benny nodded, blinking back tears. "I can be brave. I know you can. You're your mother's son." Carter pulled him into a fierce hug, then let him go. "Now move. We might not have much time." Benny ran upstairs and Carter turned to Joanna. "Can you shoot?" "Yes, qualified expert with both pistol and rifle." "Good. I'm going to get you armed. Then we're going to fortify this place as best we can." He paused. "I need to know everything, Joanna. Every detail about Rodriguez's operation. How many men does he have?" 4 that I know of for certain. Deputy Chen, Deputy Walker Sergeant Martinez, and a guy named Kowalski who works out of the evidence room. Could be more. Weapons, standard police issue. AR-15s in their cruisers. Probably personal weapons too. Rodriguez was Army before he became a cop. Force recon. He knows what he's doing. Carter absorbed this. So we're looking at 4 to 6 armed men, trained coordinated with superior firepower. Against one ex-medic with a hunting rifle. Don't forget the angry dog. Carter managed a grim smile. Bruno looks like he's ready to take a piece out of whoever comes through that door. As if in response, Bruno's ears perked up again. He moved to the window, his body going rigid. What is it, boy? Carter moved beside him, peered out into the darkness. At first, he saw nothing but snow and wind. Then, far down the driveway, a flicker of movement. Headlights distant and approaching slowly. Not one vehicle. 3. They're coming, Joanna whispered. God, they're coming now. Carter's mind raced. It was 12:45 a.m. The storm was at its worst. No help was coming. No neighbors to call. No cell service. Just him. A wounded cop, his 10-year-old son, and a dog against men who killed for a living. The headlights grew closer. Carter grabbed Joanna's arm. Basement. Now. Get Benny and Bruno and lock yourselves in. Don't come out no matter what you hear. Carter, you can't face them alone. I'm not going to face them. I'm going to slow them down. He pulled out his phone, checked it one more time. Still no signal. When the storm breaks, when you can get a signal, you call the FBI. You call everyone. You tell them everything. But right now you survive. Understand? She grabbed his hand, squeezed it hard. Don't die for me. Please. I've lost too many people already. Not planning on it. He squeezed back, then let go. Now move. Joanna stumbled toward the basement door, calling for Bruno. The dog hesitated, looking between her and Carter, then reluctantly followed his former partner. Carter went to his gun safe, his hands steady, despite the adrenaline flooding his system. He pulled out his hunting rifle, a Remington 700 that he'd used for deer hunting, loaded with .308 rounds. His service pistol, a Sig Sauer M17 that he'd bought after leaving the Army, more for nostalgia than need. The shotgun, a Mossberg 500 12-gauge loaded with buckshot. He checked each weapon methodically, the motions automatic from years of training. Magazine and chamber round safety off. He stuffed extra ammunition into his pockets. The vehicles were pulling into his driveway now. He could see them clearly through the front window, 2 Sheriff's Department SUVs and 1 unmarked sedan. Doors opening. Men stepping out into the snow, their breath steaming in the cold air. 5 of them, all armed, all wearing tactical vests. Rodriguez stepped out of the lead vehicle, and even from a distance, Carter could see the determination on his face. This wasn't a man who was going to walk away. This was a man who'd come to eliminate a problem. Carter moved to the front door, cracked it open, and stepped out onto the porch with the Remington held loosely in his hands. Not aimed at anyone. Not yet. Just visible. "Sheriff?" he called out. "Little late for a social call, isn't it?" Rodriguez stopped about 20 feet from the porch. His men spread out behind him, hands resting on their sidearms. "Mr. Williams, I think we both know why I'm here." "Can't say that I do." "Don't insult my intelligence." Rodriguez's friendly mask was gone now. His face was hard cold. "You have something that belongs to me. I want it back. All I've got is my son, my dog, and my groceries." "Sheriff, you're welcome to the groceries if you want them." "The woman Williams, Officer Hayes, she's in your house. I know she is." "Don't know what you're talking about." "I saw the tracks, you idiot. Saw where you pulled someone out of that ravine. Saw the blood in the snow." Rodriguez took a step closer. "She's a wanted fugitive. Killed a fellow officer. We're here to bring her in." Carter almost laughed. So that was going to be the story. Joanna kills a cop, goes on the run, gets gunned down, resisting arrest. Clean, neat, tragic. That's a hell of a story, Sheriff. But even if I did have someone here, which I'm not saying I do, I sure as hell wouldn't turn them over to you. Then you're making a very big mistake. Wouldn't be my first. Carter shifted his grip on the rifle. Here's what's going to happen. You and your boys are going to get back in your vehicles and drive away. Come back in the morning with an actual warrant and we can talk. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works. This is my property. You don't have a warrant. You don't have probable cause. And I'm a United States citizen exercising my Second Amendment rights on my own land. Carter's voice hardened. You take one step toward this house without a warrant, and I will defend my property. One of the deputies, young, nervous-looking, spoke up. Sheriff, maybe we should... Shut up, Chen. Rodriguez never took his eyes off Carter. Williams, your former military, Army medic, honorable discharge, decorated combat veteran. I did my research. You're a smart man. You know how this ends if you fight us. Yeah, I know exactly how it ends. Question is, do you... What's that supposed to mean? Carter smiled cold and hard. Means I spent 3 tours in Afghanistan keeping soldiers alive under fire. Means I know how to use this rifle. Means I can see in the dark, move quiet, and hit what I aim at from 300 yards. He paused. And means that if you come at my house, you better bring more than 5 men, Sheriff, because I will drop every single one of you before you reach my door. The statement hung in the frozen air. Carter saw the deputies shifting nervously, looking at each other, clearly not expecting armed resistance. Rodriguez's face darkened. You're threatening law enforcement officers. No, sir. I'm promising to defend my home against armed intruders. Big difference. For a long moment, nobody moved. The wind howled. The snow fell. 5 armed men faced 1 man on a porch. Then, Rodriguez smiled. It was the worst smile Carter had ever seen. Okay, Williams. Have it your way. He turned to his men. Fall back. We'll wait. Wait for what? Carter called. Rodriguez looked back over his shoulder. For you to realize you can't win. For your son to get scared. For the woman to bleed out from her injuries. For reality to set in. His smile widened. We've got all night. And by morning, you'll either give her up or we'll come in and take her. Either way, this ends the same. The men retreated to their vehicles, but didn't leave. They positioned the SUVs in a semicircle blocking the driveway and killed the engines, settling in for a siege. Carter backed into the house and locked the door, his heart pounding. He'd just declared war on the sheriff's department. There was no going back now. Carter stood with his back against the door, breathing hard, his rifle still in his hands. Through the window, he could see the shapes of the vehicles, dark silhouettes against the white snow. Every few seconds, a flashlight beam would sweep across the front of the house, reminding him they were out there, watching, waiting. He'd bought them time. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. The basement door creaked open and Joanna emerged, leaning heavily on the railing. Bruno was right behind her, his ears flat against his skull. I told you to stay down there, Carter said without turning around. And I told you I can shoot. She limped toward him, her face pale but determined. What happened? Rodriguez is settling in for a siege. He's got 5 men, 3 vehicles blocking the driveway. They're not leaving. Carter finally turned to face her. But they're not rushing us either. He wants to wait us out. Smart. Joanna sank into the armchair, wincing. He knows if he attacks head-on, someone might get hurt. Might be hard to explain dead deputies when the story is supposed to be about bringing in a fugitive cop. So what's his play? Psychological. He'll wait for exhaustion to set in, wait for fear to do his work for him. Then, when we're weak, when we make a mistake, he'll move. She looked at Carter with something like admiration. You surprised him, though. He didn't expect you to stand up to him. Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. Carter moved away from the window, began checking the locks on the other doors. Front door, back door, side door to the garage. All secured. How's Benny? scared but holding it together. He's a brave kid. He's his mother's son. Carter's voice caught slightly. She would have known what to do here. She was always better at the impossible situations. Tell me about her. Carter paused, surprised by the question. Why? Because we might die tonight, and I'd like to know something good about the man who's risking his life for me. Joanna's eyes were soft, despite the pain she was clearly in. Please. Carter was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on the couch across from her. The rifle rested across his lap, safety off ready. Sarah was a teacher, 3rd grade. She used to say that 8-year-olds were the perfect age because they were old enough to have real conversations, but young enough to still believe in magic. He smiled at the memory. She could light up a room just by walking into it. Had this laugh that made everyone around her want to laugh too. When she got sick when the cancer came, she made me promise 2 things. What were they? First, that I'd never let Benny forget how much she loved him. That I'd tell him stories about her, keep her alive in his memory. Carter's throat tightened. And second, that I'd teach him to help people. To stand up when it would be easier to walk away. She said that's what separates good people from bad people. Not whether you're scared, but what you do when you're scared. Joanna wiped at her eyes. She sounds incredible. She was. Carter looked toward the basement door where his son was hiding. And she'd be furious with me right now for putting Benny in danger. No. Joanna's voice was firm. She'd be proud that you're teaching him exactly what she asked you to teach him, that some things are worth fighting for. Before Carter could respond, Bruno's head snapped up. The dog moved to the window, a low growl building in his chest. Carter was on his feet instantly, rifle raised. What is it? Through the window he saw movement. One of the deputies, the young one Chen, was walking toward the house, hands raised high, no weapon visible. What the hell? Carter muttered. It's a trick, Joanna said immediately. Has to be. But Chen kept coming slowly, carefully, until he was about 10 feet from the porch. Then he stopped. Mr. Williams. His voice was young, nervous. Can I talk to you? Just talk. Carter moved to the door, cracked it open an inch. You've got 30 seconds. My name is Tommy Chen. I've been with the department for 6 months. The kid couldn't have been more than 23, 24. I didn't know about any of this, about what the sheriff was doing. And you know now. I heard them talking, in the vehicle, about Officer Hayes, about making it look like she went crazy, killed someone. Tommy's voice shook. Mr. Williams, I didn't sign up to murder people. I wanted to help my community. I wanted to be one of the good guys. Carter studied the young deputy through the crack in the door. The fear on his face looked genuine, so did the shame. What do you want from me, deputy? I want to help. I want to do the right thing. Tommy glanced back over his shoulder toward the vehicles. But I'm outnumbered. If I try to stop this alone, they'll kill me too. I need you to know that not all of us are dirty. And when this is over, when the FBI comes, I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. That's real noble, son. But it doesn't help me much right now. I know. Tommy's shoulders sagged. I wanted you to know. And I wanted to tell you that the sheriff is planning to cut your power in about 10 minutes. Then he's going to use thermal imaging to track your movements inside the house. When he knows where everyone is, he's going to breach. Carter's blood ran cold. Why are you telling me this? Because Officer Hayes's husband trained me. He was my mentor when I first joined. He was a good man, and they killed him. Tommy's jaw tightened. I can't stop the sheriff, but I can give you a fighting chance. Before Carter could respond, a shout came from the vehicles. Chen, get back here now. Tommy flinched, then turned and walked quickly back toward the SUVs. Rodriguez met him halfway, and even from a distance, Carter could see the sheriff grab the young deputy by the vest, shove him hard. Carter shut the door and turned to Joanna. We've got about 10 minutes before they cut the power. You believe him? My gut says yes, which means we need to move fast. Carter was already heading for the basement. Benny, I need you up here. His son appeared at the top of the basement stairs, clutching his backpack. Dad. Change of plans. They're going to cut the power and use thermal to track us, which means we can't stay in the house. Joanna stood up, swaying slightly. Carter, I can barely walk. You take Benny and run. Leave me here. I'll buy you time. Not happening. Carter moved to the kitchen, started pulling supplies from the pantry. We've got something they don't know about. The old storm shelter. What storm shelter? When I bought this place, the previous owner showed me an old root cellar about 50 yards from the house. Built in the 20s, mostly collapsed, but there's still a usable section underground. I've been meaning to fix it up, never got around to it. He grabbed a flashlight, batteries, the emergency medical kit from under the sink. It's accessed through the garage. We can get there without them seeing us on thermal. Dad, we have to go through the snow, Benny said quietly. Won't they see our footprints? Not if we go during the next big wind gust. The snow will cover our tracks. Carter looked at his son, felt pride surge through him, despite the fear. Good thinking, buddy. He handed the backpack to Benny, heavier now with supplies. You're going to carry this to the shelter. Can you do it? Yes, sir. Good. Joanna, can you make it 50 yards? She gritted her teeth. I'll make it 100 if I have to. That's the spirit. Carter moved to the garage door, peered through the small window. The garage was detached from the house, connected by a covered breezeway. Beyond it, he could just make out the depression in the snow that marked where the old storm shelter was hidden. Bruno, you're going to have to stay quiet. No barking. Understand? The dog's ears perked up at his name, and he moved to Carter's side, calm and focused. Whatever training David Hayes had given him, it was still there, buried under 2 years of trauma, but coming back now when it mattered. Okay. Carter checked his watch. We've got maybe 5 minutes before they cut the power. Here's the order. Benny first, then Joanna, then Bruno, then me. We move fast and quiet. Once we're in the shelter, we stay there until the FBI arrives, or until we have no other choice. What about you? Joanna asked. You're just going to hide with us? No. Carter picked up his rifle. I'm going to make Rodriguez think we're still in the house. Give you time to get clear. Carter, that's suicide. It's tactics. He met her eyes. I'll set up positions that make it look like the house is defended. Leave lights on, timers, create movement. Then I'll slip out and join you before they breach. And if you don't make it, then you take care of my son. His voice was steady, final. Promise me, Joanna. Whatever happens, you get Benny to safety. She stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. I promise. Good. Carter moved to the window, watching the vehicles, waiting for the right moment. The wind was picking up again, the snow coming down in thick sheets. Almost time. He quickly moved through the house, setting up his deception. He positioned a hunting jacket on a coat rack near the upstairs window, visible from outside. Set a timer on the living room lamp to flick on and off every few minutes. Prop the shotgun against the kitchen window frame, where thermal imaging might pick it up. Small details, but maybe enough to make Rodriguez think they were dug in and waiting. The lights flickered once, twice. That's our warning, Carter said. Power's about to go. Everyone to the garage, now. They moved quickly. Benny first, his small form disappearing through the door into the darkness of the garage. Joanna followed, limping badly, but determined. Bruno went next, silent and ghost-like. Carter grabbed one last thing, an emergency flare from the utility closet, then followed them out. The garage was pitch black and freezing. Carter clicked on his flashlight, keeping the beam low. Benny, you remember where the shelter is? Past the old tractor, 30 steps straight out. Exactly right. You're going to lead. Count the steps. When you get to 30, stop and wait for us. But Dad, I can't see. The lights died. The whole house went dark behind them. Now, Carter whispered urgently. "Go now while they're watching their thermal scopes boot up." He shoved open the garage's side door. The wind hit them like a wall snow so thick it was like trying to see through a white curtain. Perfect. Benny disappeared into the storm. Joanna went after him and Carter saw her stumble, nearly fall. But she caught herself and kept moving. Bruno stayed close to Carter, pressed against his leg. "Okay, boy, let's go." They stepped out into the blizzard. The cold was brutal, stealing Carter's breath, making his eyes water instantly. He kept his head down, counted steps. 1, 2, 3. Behind him, through the garage, he could see flashlight beams sweeping through the house. They were inside already. Faster than he'd expected. 10, 11, 12. A shout from behind. Had they been spotted, Carter didn't look back. Just kept moving. 20, 21, 22. His foot hit something solid, the old tractor half buried in snow, which meant the shelter was close. "Benny," he called softly. "Here, Dad." Carter followed his son's voice and found him crouched next to what looked like a pile of old boards and snow. But when Carter brushed the snow away, he revealed a wooden door set into the ground at an angle, the old-style storm cellar entrance that people used to build before modern basements. The door was heavy, swollen from moisture, but Carter got it open. A rush of cold air came up from below, cold, but not as cold as the blizzard. The shelter. "Down," he ordered. "Benny first." His son disappeared into the darkness without hesitation. Joanna went next, her descent awkward and painful. Bruno bounded down after her. Carter took one last look back toward the house. Through the snow, he could see lights moving inside. Lots of them. They'd brought the whole team in, were sweeping room by room. They'd realize the house was empty soon. Maybe minutes. Maybe seconds. Carter climbed into the shelter and pulled the door shut above him, plunging them into absolute darkness. For a moment, nobody breathed. They just listened. Listened to the muffled howl of the wind above. Listened to each other's rapid breathing. Listened for sounds of pursuit. Nothing. Carter clicked on his flashlight. They were in a space about 10 feet by 10 feet, with a ceiling just high enough for Carter to stand if he hunched. The walls were old stone, crumbling in places, but solid enough. The floor was dirt, mostly dry. In the corner, an old bench and some shelving that looked like it might collapse if you sneezed on it. But it was shelter. It was hidden. It was survival. "Everyone okay?" Carter asked quietly. "I'm okay," Benny whispered, his voice small. "I'm fine," Joanna said, though she was clearly in pain. Bruno just pressed against Joanna's legs, silent and alert. Carter checked his watch. 1:47 a.m. The FBI agent was supposed to arrive in Denver at 10 a.m. That meant 8 hours, 13 minutes. They had to survive 8 hours, 13 minutes. "Okay," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "Here's what we're going to do. We're going to stay quiet. We're going to stay warm. And we're going to wait for morning." "What if they find us?" Benny asked. "They won't. The snow's covering our tracks. The shelter's hidden, and they think we're in the house." Carter put his arm around his son's shoulders. "We're safe here, buddy. I promise." It was a lie. He had no idea if they were safe. But sometimes, that's what a father had to do. Lie to make his son feel protected, even when the world was falling apart. Above them, faintly, they heard a sound that made everyone freeze. Gunshots. 3 quick bursts. Automatic weapons fire ripping through the house they'd just abandoned. Benny flinched against Carter's side. Joanna's face went white. Bruno's hackles rose. "They're shooting at the decoys," Carter said quietly. "They think we're in there." More gunshots. The sound of breaking glass. Shouts that were too muffled to make out words. Then silence. The silence was somehow worse than the gunfire. "They know," Joanna whispered. "They've realized the house is empty." Carter nodded slowly. "Which means they're going to start searching. And we need to be ready for that." He pulled out the flare from his pocket, then his lighter. If they find this shelter, if they try to come down here, I'm going to light this flare and throw it up through the door. The magnesium burn will temporarily blind anyone looking into the shelter. In that moment, we run. We scatter in different directions. Bruno goes with Benny. Joanna and I create a distraction. We meet back up at the highway and flag down the first vehicle we see. "Dad, I don't want to leave you," Benny said, his voice breaking. "You won't have to, buddy. This is just a backup plan. A just in case." Carter squeezed his son's shoulder. "But I need you to promise me something. If it comes to that, if I tell you to run, you run. You don't look back. You don't wait for me. You just run, and you don't stop until you're safe. Can you promise me that—" Benny was crying now, silent tears streaming down his face. "I promise." "Good boy." Carter pulled him close, kissed the top of his head. "I love you so much, Benny. You know that, right?" "I know, Dad. I love you too." Joanna was crying too, Carter realized. She'd turned away, trying to hide it, but her shoulders were shaking. "Hey," Carter said softly. "We're going to make it. All of us." "How can you know that?" "Because your husband didn't die for nothing. Because Tommy Chen is going to testify. Because the truth is going to come out." Carter's voice was firm. "And because I didn't survive 3 tours in Afghanistan just to get taken out by a corrupt sheriff in my own backyard." Despite everything, Joanna laughed a short, wet sound. "You're either the bravest man I've ever met or the craziest. Can't it be both?" Above them, they heard engines starting, voices shouting, the sound of boots crunching through snow, moving away from the house, spreading out. They were searching. Carter turned off the flashlight, plunging them back into darkness. In the dark, sounds were magnified. Every breath seemed too loud. Every movement of fabric seemed like a scream. Benny's hand found Carter's in the darkness and held on tight. They waited. Time moved strangely in the dark. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound from above made them tense, made them hold their breath. Once footsteps passed directly over the shelter, so close that dirt sifted down from between the stones. But the footsteps kept moving, didn't stop, didn't pause. The searcher hadn't seen the door. The snow had done its job. Carter checked his watch. 2:15 a.m. They'd been in the shelter for 28 minutes. It felt like a lifetime. "Carter," Joanna's voice was barely audible. "Yeah, thank you. For everything. For saving my life. For protecting me. For giving my husband's death meaning. We're not out of this yet." "I know. But I needed to say it. Just in case." In the darkness, Bruno whined softly. Joanna shushed him gently, stroking his head. "He remembers," she said quietly. "He remembers the night David died. The gunfire. The fear. He's been living with that trauma for 2 years, and now we're putting him right back into it." "Animals are resilient," Carter said. "So are people. We do what we have to do to survive." "Is that what you tell yourself when the nightmares come?" Carter was quiet for a moment. "I tell myself that every person I saved was worth every nightmare I have, and that Sarah would be proud of the man I became even with all the broken pieces." "She would be," Joanna said with certainty. "She absolutely would be." More time passed. 3:00 a.m. 3:30 a.m. The sounds of searching grew more distant. Carter allowed himself a small hope that maybe, just maybe, they'd given up. Maybe Rodriguez had decided to cut his losses, retreat, come up with a new plan. Then, at 3:47 a.m., they heard it. The sound of the garage door opening. Someone was in the garage directly above them. Everyone froze. Carter's hand moved to the flare in his pocket. Benny's grip on his other hand tightened until it hurt. Footsteps. Slow, methodical. Moving around the garage. A voice. Rodriguez. "I know you're here somewhere, Williams. I can feel it. You're close." More footsteps. The sound of things being moved. The old tractor's engine compartment being opened, Checked closed. You think you're smart, think you can hide from me. But I've been hunting men for 20 years, and I always find them. The footsteps moved closer to where the shelter door was hidden under snow and old boards. Carter's thumb was on the flare's cap, ready to twist and light. Rodriguez's voice came again so close now that it sounded like he was standing directly on top of them. You know what I admire about you, Williams. You've got principles. You're willing to die for them. That's rare these days. Most people talk about honor, about doing the right thing. But when it comes down to it, they fold. They choose survival. A pause. But principles don't stop bullets. And they won't protect your son when I find him. Benny's hand was shaking in Carter's grip. Carter squeezed gently, trying to communicate calm, trying to say without words that it was okay, that they were safe, that the bad man couldn't hurt them. The footsteps moved away, then stopped, then came back. Rodriguez was pacing, thinking. He knew they were close. He just couldn't figure out where. "Tell you what, Williams," the sheriff called out. "I'm going to make you an offer. One time only. You send out Officer Hayes and I let you and your son walk away. Clean, no questions asked. You can leave Colorado, start over somewhere else. I'll even give you money to help with the transition. 50,000 cash." Silence. "Or," Rodriguez continued, "you can keep hiding. Keep protecting a woman you don't even know. And when I find you, and I will find you, I'll make sure your son watches you die. Then I'll put him in foster care with a nice family who works for me. He'll grow up knowing his father died for nothing." The cruelty of it, the calculated psychological warfare, made Carter's blood boil. But he stayed silent. Stayed still. "Last chance, Williams. 5 seconds. 5. 4. 3. Carter's finger tightened on the flare. 2. 1. The footsteps moved away. Rapidly now. Rodriguez was leaving the garage. They heard the door close, heard the crunch of boots in snow fading into the distance. Then silence. Nobody moved for a full minute. Finally, Benny whispered, "Is he gone?" "For now," Carter said, "but he'll be back." Joanna's voice was hollow. "He's going to find us eventually. We can't hide in here forever." "We don't have to hide forever. Just until morning. Just until the FBI comes." Carter checked his watch again. 4:02 a.m. 5 hours, 58 minutes until 10 a.m. They could make it. They had to make it, because the alternative was unthinkable. The hours crawled by in that dark shelter like wounded animals. Carter kept checking his watch obsessively, watching the luminous hands move with agonizing slowness. 4:15 a.m., 4:32 a.m., 4:49 a.m. Each minute was a small victory. Each hour, a miracle they were still undiscovered. Benny had fallen into an exhausted sleep against Carter's shoulder, his breathing soft and even despite the cold. Carter envied him that ability to find rest, even in crisis. He'd lost that gift somewhere in Kandahar, in the back of medical tents, where soldiers screamed and bled and died while he tried desperately to save them. Joanna was awake, though. Carter could hear her breathing quick and shallow. Pain breathing. The kind that meant her injuries were worse than she was letting on. "How bad is it, really?" he asked softly. "Bad enough." Her voice was tight. "I think I cracked some ribs when the cruiser rolled. Every breath feels like someone's stabbing me. Could be a punctured lung. Could be, but there's nothing we can do about it down here, so I'm choosing to believe it's just bruised ribs and my body being dramatic." Carter almost smiled at that. "Denial as a survival strategy. I'm familiar with it." "Yeah." "Spent 6 months convincing myself Sarah's cancer was going to respond to treatment. That the doctors were wrong about the timeline. That we'd have more time." He was quiet for a moment. "Denial works great right up until it doesn't." "I'm sorry," Joanna said. "About your wife, about all of this." "Don't be. Sarah used to say that we don't get to choose what happens to us, but we get to choose what we do about it." Carter shifted carefully, trying not to wake Benny. Right now, I'm choosing to get you to that FBI meeting. Choosing to make sure David's death meant something. Choosing to teach my son that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing anyway. Bruno stirred in the darkness, moved closer to Joanna. She stroked his head absently, and Carter heard her breath catch. What is it? I keep thinking about the night David died. Bruno was there. He saw everything, and he's been carrying that trauma alone for 2 years. Her voice broke. I searched for him, Carter, for months. Put up flyers, checked every shelter within 100 miles. I thought he was dead, thought I'd lost them both. But you didn't. He survived, just like you survived, just like we're all going to survive tonight. You sound so sure. I have to be sure. For Benny, for you, for myself. Carter leaned his head back against the cold stone wall. In Afghanistan, there was this saying among the medics. Not on my watch. Didn't matter how bad the wound was, how slim the chances were. We'd look at that dying soldier and say, not on my watch. Because giving up wasn't an option. And did it work? Did everyone live? Carter was quiet for a long time. No. A lot of them died anyway. But some of them lived. And those were the ones I'd think about when things got dark. The ones who went home to their families. The ones who got second chances. He looked toward where Joanna sat invisible in the darkness. You're getting a second chance. David's getting justice. And my son is learning that his father stands up when it matters. That's worth fighting for. Above them, the wind was starting to die down. The howling had reduced to a steady whisper, and Carter knew what that meant. The storm was passing, which meant visibility would improve, which meant Rodriguez's search would become more effective. As if reading his thoughts, Joanna said, when the storm clears, they'll find our tracks. Not if the wind did its job. And even if they find tracks, we've got a few hours of darkness left. We can use that. Use it how? Carter had been thinking about this for the last hour, turning over plans in his mind. Discarding the ones that got people killed, looking for the option that kept everyone alive. We can't stay here. Once the sun comes up, this shelter is a trap. We need to move. Move where they're watching the roads. Not the roads, the woods. Carter had grown up in Montana, had learned to hunt and track before he learned to drive. The Colorado wilderness was different, but the principles were the same. There's a hiking trail about a mile east of here, connects to the state park. If we can get to the ranger station, we can use their radio to contact the FBI. A mile through snow with a kid and a wounded cop. You got a better idea. Joanna laughed, a sound with no humor in it. No. God help me, I don't. Then we leave at first light, maybe 5:36 a.m. Still dark enough to hide our movement, but light enough to see where we're going. That gives Rodriguez 4 more hours to find us. Then we better hope he doesn't. They fell silent again. Carter could hear Benny's soft snoring, could hear Bruno's occasional movements, could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. Fear had a sound he'd learned. It was the sound of your own body betraying you, your heart racing, your breath quickening, your mind screaming at you to run even when running meant death. At 5:17 a.m. they heard vehicles starting up outside, engines rumbling, tires crunching through snow. For a moment, Carter's heart leaped. Were they leaving? Had Rodriguez given up? But then he heard Rodriguez's voice, faint but clear through the shelter's thin door. Spread out. Search the perimeter. They couldn't have gone far in this storm. Check every building, every vehicle, every goddamn snowdrift. I want them found. More voices responding. Affirmative, sir. Yes, sir. Moving out. The vehicles dispersed their engines, fading in different directions. Carter checked his watch. 5:23 a.m. Sunrise was at 6:47 a.m. They had an hour and 24 minutes before the sky started to lighten. An hour and 24 minutes to decide if they were staying or going. Carter, Benny's sleepy voice came from against his shoulder. Are they still looking for us? Yeah, buddy, but they haven't found us yet. Are we going to be okay? It was the same question Benny had asked when Sarah was dying. The same question he had asked during thunderstorms, during the first days of school, during every moment of fear and uncertainty in his young life. And Carter had always given him the same answer. "We're going to be okay. I promise." Benny was quiet, then said in a small voice, "Mom used to promise too, and then she wasn't okay." The words hit Carter like a physical blow. He'd known this was coming, known that eventually Benny would learn that promises couldn't always be kept, that fathers couldn't always protect their children from the harsh realities of the world. But he'd hoped for more time, more innocence, more years before his son had to understand that sometimes good people died and bad people won. "You're right," Carter said softly. "Mom promised, and she still got sick. She still died. And I promised her I'd take care of you, and right now, I've got you hiding in a hole in the ground while bad men look for us." "Dad." But here's the thing, Benny. Mom didn't break her promise. She fought that cancer with everything she had. Every treatment, every surgery, every painful day. She kept fighting until her body couldn't fight anymore. That's not breaking a promise. That's being brave. Carter pulled his son closer. "And I'm fighting too. Fighting to keep you safe. Fighting to help Officer Hayes. Fighting to do what's right. So when I promise you we're going to be okay, I'm not saying nothing bad will happen. I'm saying I will do everything in my power to make sure you survive this. That's a promise I can keep." Benny was crying silently, his tears soaking into Carter's shirt. "I don't want you to die like Mom died. I don't plan to. I've got way too much left to do. I've got to teach you to drive, walk you to your first day of high school, embarrass you in front of your first girlfriend. There's no way I'm missing all that." Despite his tears, Benny laughed. "You're going to embarrass me. It's my job as a dad. It's practically required by law." Joanna's voice came from the darkness, thick with emotion. "You're a good father, Carter Williams." "I'm trying to be." He kissed the top of Benny's head. "That's all any of us can do. Try our best and hope it's enough." At 5:45 a.m., Carter made his decision. "We're moving. Now, while it's still dark." "Now?" Joanna struggled to sit up. "You said first light." "I changed my mind. Rodriguez is expanding his search perimeter. Every minute we wait is a minute closer to being discovered." Carter was already moving, gathering their meager supplies. "Benny, get your backpack on. Joanna, can you walk?" "I'll walk if I have to crawl to do it." "That's what I wanted to hear." Carter moved to the shelter door, pressed his ear against it, listening. He could hear the wind softer now. Could hear the distant sound of engines far away. No footsteps, no voices. "Okay, here's how this works. I go out first, make sure it's clear. Then Benny, then Bruno, then Joanna. We move fast and quiet to the tree line. It's about 200 yards. Once we're in the woods, we head east. Questions? "What if we get separated?" Benny asked. "We don't get separated. We stay together no matter what. But if somehow we do, you remember your survival training. Find shelter, stay put, make yourself visible to rescuers. But that's not going to happen because we're staying together." Carter took a deep breath, put his hand on the shelter door. This was it. The moment they either escaped or got caught. The moment that would determine if they lived or died. "Everyone ready?" "Ready," Benny whispered. "Ready," Joanna said. Bruno made a soft sound that Carter chose to interpret as agreement. "Okay, on 3. 1, 2, 3. Carter pushed the door open. Cold air rushed in, not as brutal as before, but still sharp enough to steal his breath. He climbed out quickly, rifle first, scanning the area. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, that deep blue-gray that came before dawn. Snow covered everything, pristine and unmarked. The garage stood silent and dark. The house beyond it was lit up like a Christmas tree, every light on every window glowing. Rodriguez's men had clearly been through it thoroughly. No movement. No vehicles in sight. The SUVs had spread out across the property searching. "Clear," Carter whispered down into the shelter. "Come on." Benny emerged like a shadow, quick and quiet. Bruno followed, his dark fur blending into the pre-dawn darkness. Then Joanna moving slowly, her face twisted with pain. Carter closed the shelter door carefully, brushed snow over it to hide their exit. Then he pointed toward the tree line. "See that's where we're going. Fast as you can. Go." They ran. Benny moved like a deer, light and fast despite his heavy backpack. Bruno bounded alongside him, protective and alert. Joanna stumbled after them, her breath coming in harsh gasps, but she kept moving. Carter brought up the rear, his rifle ready, his eyes scanning constantly for threats. 50 yards, 100 yards, 150. Then lights appeared. Headlights sweeping around the far side of the house. One of Rodriguez's vehicles returning to the search area. "Down," Carter hissed. They all dropped into the snow, pressing themselves flat. Carter covered Benny with his own body, made himself as small as possible. The headlights swept across the field, passing over where they lay hidden. The vehicle slowed. Carter's heart hammered. Had they been seen? Had the driver spotted movement? The vehicle stopped. A door opened. Footsteps in the snow. Carter's finger moved to his rifle's trigger. If it came to it, if they were discovered, he'd give Benny and Joanna time to run. He'd hold off whoever came as long as he could. The footsteps came closer. Closer. Then stopped. A voice. "Deputy Chen." "I don't see anything here, Sheriff. Just snow." Rodriguez's voice crackled over a radio. "You sure thermal picked up something moving?" "Probably a deer. Lots of wildlife out here." A pause. Carter could feel Rodriguez thinking, evaluating, deciding. "Fine. Keep searching. They're here somewhere. I can feel it." "Yes, sir." The footsteps retreated. The door closed. The vehicle drove away. Carter waited until he couldn't hear the engine anymore, then whispered, "Move, now." They got up and ran the remaining distance to the trees. The moment they crossed into the woods, Carter felt marginally safer. The pines were dense here, their branches heavy with snow, creating natural cover. The ground was less exposed to wind, which meant their tracks would show, but it couldn't be helped. "Keep moving," Carter urged. "We need distance." They pushed deeper into the forest. The going was harder here, the snow deeper, where it had accumulated in drifts. Benny was breathing hard, his cheeks flushed with exertion. Joanna was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line against the pain. After 20 minutes of hard hiking, Carter called a halt. They were about half a mile from the house now, deep enough into the woods that they couldn't see any lights or hear any engines. "Rest," he said. 2 minutes. Joanna collapsed against a tree, sliding down until she was sitting in the snow. Her hand was pressed to her ribs, her breathing labored. "Let me see," Carter said, kneeling beside her. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. Let me see." Reluctantly, she moved her hand. Even in the dim pre-dawn light, Carter could see the bruising spreading across her side, dark purple and angry. "Definitely broken ribs," he said gently, probing the area. Joanna hissed in pain. "Maybe 3 or 4. You're lucky you can breathe at all." "Don't feel lucky." "Trust me, you are." Carter pulled out the medical kit from Benny's backpack. He had some elastic bandages, not ideal for broken ribs, but better than nothing. "I'm going to wrap this. It's going to hurt." "Everything already hurts." Carter worked quickly, wrapping her torso to provide support and compression. Joanna gritted her teeth but didn't cry out. When he was done, she nodded. "Better. Thank you." "Can you keep going?" "Do I have a choice?" "Not really." "Then I can keep going." Benny was standing watch, looking back the way they'd come. Bruno was beside him, ears perked alert for any sound of pursuit. "See anything, buddy?" Carter asked. "No. But I can hear engines, far away." Carter listened. Benny was right. Somewhere in the distance, vehicles were moving, searching. They had to keep moving. "Okay, let's go. We head east. Stay in the thick cover. Don't break any branches if you can help it. Walk in each other's footsteps when possible to minimize tracks. They moved out again, Carter taking the lead now. The sky was getting lighter by the minute, that gradual shift from night to day that happened so slowly you didn't notice until suddenly you could see clearly. 6:23 a.m. They'd been moving for almost 40 minutes. Carter estimated they'd covered maybe a mile and a half, maybe less with the difficult terrain. The ranger station was still at least 2 miles away. Then Bruno stopped dead, his ears flat against his head, a low growl building in his chest. Carter froze. "What is it, boy?" The dog was staring off to their left, toward a section of forest that looked identical to every other section. Then Carter heard it too. Voices, multiple voices getting closer. "Hide," he whispered urgently. "Now!" They scattered into the brush. Carter pulled Benny behind a large pine, pressed them both into the snow-covered undergrowth. Joanna crawled behind a fallen log with Bruno. They all went completely still. The voices grew closer. Carter could make out words now. "Should have just called the FBI ourselves. This is insane." "You want to tell Rodriguez that be my guest?" "I'm just saying we're killing a woman, and maybe a kid, over what money? Over not going to prison for the rest of our lives. That's what." 3 men emerged from the trees about 30 yards away. Deputies all armed, all looking tired and cold and miserable. Carter recognized 2 of them, Martinez and Walker from Rodriguez's team. "Spread out," Martinez said. "Check every hiding spot. If you see them, call it in before you engage." The 3 men began to fan out, moving methodically through the forest, checking behind trees and under brush. They were coming right toward where Carter and Benny were hiding. Carter's hand moved to his rifle. He couldn't let them find Benny. Couldn't let them take his son. If it came to it, he'd have to shoot. Have to kill men he'd seen at community barbecues, men who'd coached Little League and helped with school fundraisers, men who'd become killers for money. The closest deputy was 15 yards away now. 10 yards. He was going to walk right past their hiding spot. He was going to see them. Carter raised his rifle slowly, carefully sighting down the barrel. Then Bruno barked, a single sharp bark from where he was hidden with Joanna. The deputies spun toward the sound, raising their weapons. "There!" one of them shouted. "By that log!" They rushed forward, and Carter realized what Bruno had done. The dog had drawn their attention away from Benny, sacrificing his own hiding spot to save the boy. Carter made a split-second decision. He stood up. "Federal officer," he shouted in his best command voice. "Drop your weapons!" The deputies whirled toward him, confused, off balance. It was a lie. Carter wasn't a federal officer, but it bought him a second of hesitation. "Drop them now or I will fire." Martinez recovered first. "That's not a Fed. That's Williams. Take him." The clearing exploded into chaos. Carter fired first, a warning shot over their heads. The deputies scattered, diving for cover. Return fire came immediately. Bullets whipping past Carter's head, thudding into the tree behind him. "Run!" he shouted to Benny. "Run now!" Benny didn't hesitate. He grabbed his backpack and ran crashing through the brush like Carter had taught him during their camping trips. Make noise, create confusion. Use the chaos. Carter laid down, covering fire, not aiming to kill, but to keep the deputies pinned. He fired 3 shots in quick succession, each one forcing the men to dive deeper into cover. "Joanna," he shouted. "Move! Get Benny to the ranger station." He saw her rise from behind the log, Bruno at her side, and stumble after Benny into the trees. Good. They were moving. They had a chance. Carter fired again, then turned and ran in the opposite direction, drawing the pursuit away from his son. It was what any father would do, what every soldier who'd ever covered a retreat had done. Buy time with your own life so others could live. Bullets chased him through the forest, bark exploding from trees as rounds hit all around him. Carter zigzagged, using every bit of cover his combat training coming back like muscle memory. He'd done this before in streets of Kandahar, except there he'd been dragging wounded men, and here he was alone, and the stakes were somehow even higher because it was his son's life, his family's survival. He ran for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, then dove behind a cluster of boulders and checked his rifle. 4 rounds left. Not enough. Not nearly enough. Radio chatter erupted from somewhere behind him. The deputies calling for backup reporting shots fired "Officer needs assistance," which meant more men were coming. Which meant Carter was about to be surrounded. He needed a new plan. Through the trees ahead, he saw a ravine, steep-sided and rocky. Dangerous terrain, but defensible. If he could get down there, find a position where they could only come at him from one direction, he could hold them off longer. Carter ran for the ravine, sliding down the rocky slope in a shower of loose stones and snow. He hit the bottom hard, felt his ankle twist, ignored the pain. Pain was information, and right now, the information didn't matter. He found an overhang, a natural shelter formed by 2 large rocks leaning against each other. He wedged himself into it, rifle ready, and waited. The deputies appeared at the top of the ravine within seconds. 3 of them spread out, weapons raised. "Williams," Martinez shouted down, "you're surrounded. There's nowhere to go." "Then I guess we're at an impasse," Carter shouted back. "Don't be stupid. You can't win this." "Maybe not. But I can make it real expensive for you to find out." More men were arriving at the ravine's edge. Carter counted 6 now, then 8. Rodriguez's whole team assembled to take down one ex-medic with a hunting rifle. Then Rodriguez himself appeared, his tall frame unmistakable even at a distance. "Williams." The sheriff's voice echoed through the ravine. "Let's talk like reasonable men. I'm done talking to you. Your son got away. So did Officer Hayes. We lost them in the woods. So all this shooting and running, it's for nothing. They're gone. You won. Now you can surrender and we can all go home." Carter's heart surged. Benny had escaped. Joanna was free. They'd made it. But he knew Rodriguez was lying about the rest. There was no going home. There was no surrender that ended with Carter alive. The moment he put down his weapon, they'd kill him and claim he'd attacked them. "I don't believe you," Carter shouted back. "I don't care what you believe, I'm offering you a chance to live. Like you offered David Hayes a chance. Like you're going to offer Joanna." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. David Hayes was a traitor to his own. He knew the risks. He was a hero. He stood up to corruption. He did what cops are supposed to do. He was naive. Rodriguez's voice had an edge to it now, anger bleeding through. "You think this world runs on honor, on justice. It runs on power. Williams, on who's strong enough to take what they want and smart enough to keep it. And that makes murder okay. It makes survival possible." Rodriguez stepped closer to the edge. "You were a soldier. You know what I'm talking about. You killed people in Afghanistan, didn't you? In the name of your country, in the name of protecting your fellow soldiers. How is that different from what I'm doing? I killed enemy combatants. You murdered your own men. Semantics. In the end, we all do what we have to do to survive." Carter felt his anger building hot and righteous. "No, that's where you're wrong. We get to choose. Every day, every moment, we choose who we are. David Hayes chose to be a good man. Joanna chose to seek justice. I'm choosing to protect my son and do what's right. And you chose to be a coward who kills for money." The words hung in the cold air. Then Rodriguez's mask finally fell away completely. "You sanctimonious son of a bitch. You think you're better than me? You're nothing but a broken-down medic playing hero in the woods. And now you're going to die for it." He turned to his men. "Everyone with a rifle take position. On my mark, we light him up. I want overwhelming fire. I want him dead." Carter watched them spread out, taking shooting positions. 8 rifles aimed at the rocks where he crouched. He had 4 bullets. Basic math said he was about to die. He thought about Benny somewhere in the woods with Joanna and Bruno. Safe. Running toward help. That's what mattered. His son would live. would remember his father stood up for what was right. Carter raised his rifle, sighted on Rodriguez. If he was going down, he was taking the sheriff with him. "On three," Rodriguez shouted. "One." Carter's finger tightened on the trigger. "Two." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "Thur." The sound of helicopter rotors cut through the dawn like the voice of God. Everyone froze, looking up. A black helicopter crested the ridge, flying low and fast. Then another. Both had FBI stenciled on their sides in large white letters. And from the forest behind Rodriguez's position came the shout every criminal fears most. "FBI, drop your weapons. Hands in the air. Drop them now." Federal agents poured out of the trees, at least 20 of them, all in tactical gear, all with weapons raised. They'd come in quietly, using the sound of the standoff to mask their approach, and now they had Rodriguez's entire team surrounded. Rodriguez's face went white. His deputies looked at each other in panic, their weapons wavering. "I said drop your weapons." The lead agent, a woman with steel-gray hair and a voice like gravel, stepped forward. "You have 5 seconds before we open fire. 5-4. The deputies started dropping their rifles, raising their hands. But Rodriguez didn't move. His gun was still in his hand, still pointed toward Carter's position. "Sheriff Marcus Rodriguez," the agent shouted, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, corruption of a public official, drug trafficking, and about 15 other charges we'll get to later. Put down your weapon." Rodriguez looked down at Carter, and for just a moment their eyes met. Carter saw the calculation there, saw the man weighing his options. Fight and die or surrender, and spend the rest of his life in prison. "Don't do it," Carter called out. "It's over, Rodriguez. You lost." The sheriff smiled that terrible smile one last time. "No, Williams. Nobody wins here." He raised his gun. The FBI agents fired. Rodriguez went down in a hail of bullets, his body jerking with the impacts before collapsing into the snow. Red bloomed across the white, spreading like ink in water. Carter looked away. It was over. The federal agents swarmed the area, securing the deputies, clearing weapons, calling for medical support. Carter climbed slowly out of his hiding spot, his hands raised to show he was no threat. The gray-haired agent approached him, lowering her weapon. "Mr. Williams, I'm Special Agent Morrison. We've been looking for you." "I'm glad you found me." Carter's voice was shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "My son, Officer Hayes. They're out there somewhere. I need to—" "They're safe. We found them about 10 minutes ago. They're the ones who told us where you were." Morrison holstered her weapon. "You did good, Mr. Williams. Real good." Carter's legs gave out. He sat down hard in the snow, the rifle falling from his numb fingers. "Benny's okay. He's really okay. He's fine. Worried sick about you, but fine." Morrison signaled to one of her agents. "Get this man some water and a blanket, and somebody radio the chopper to bring his son here." Within minutes, Carter heard the most beautiful sound in the world. "Dad! Dad!" Benny came running through the trees, stumbling and crying, and threw himself into Carter's arms. Carter held him so tight he was probably crushing him, but he couldn't let go, couldn't stop the tears that were streaming down his face. "I thought they got you," Benny sobbed. "I heard all the shooting and I thought, I'm okay, buddy, I'm okay. You did perfect. You got help. You saved us." Officer Hayes did. She used her radio. She called Agent Morrison and told her everything. Carter looked up and saw Joanna being helped toward them by 2 agents, Bruno walking protectively at her side. She looked terrible, pale and shaking, and barely able to stand, but she was alive. Their eyes met, and no words were needed. They'd survived. Against all odds, through the longest night of their lives, they'd survived. Agent Morrison crouched down beside Carter. "We need to get Officer Hayes to a hospital. Those ribs need treatment. And we'll need statements from all of you, but that can wait a few hours." "How did you know to come?" Carter asked. "Officer Hayes' encrypted files hit our server yesterday afternoon. I flew out immediately, was supposed to meet with her this morning." Morrison's expression was grim. When she didn't show up for our meeting, I started making calls. When I heard about a standoff in the woods involving a sheriff's department, I put two and two together. Deputy Chen, Joanna said weakly. He helped us. He's one of the good ones. Morrison nodded. We'll make sure that's noted. Anyone who cooperates will get consideration. The helicopters had landed in a clearing nearby, and medics were rushing toward them with stretchers. Carter tried to stand, found his twisted ankle wouldn't hold his weight. Easy, Morrison said. You're not going anywhere on that ankle. Let the medics look at you. The next hour passed in a blur of medical examinations, warm blankets, hot coffee that tasted like heaven. Benny refused to leave Carter's side, stayed pressed against him. Even when the medics were checking his ankle badly sprained, not broken, he'd gotten lucky. Joanna was loaded onto a stretcher, Bruno refusing to leave her. One of the medics tried to shoo the dog away, but Agent Morrison intervened. Let the dog stay. He's earned it. As they loaded Joanna into the helicopter, she reached out and grabbed Carter's hand. Thank you, for everything, for believing me, for protecting me, for not giving up. Thank David, Carter said quietly, and Bruno. They're the real heroes here. No. Her grip tightened. You are. You and Benny both. They flew to Denver in the FBI helicopters, the mountains passing below them in the growing daylight. Carter sat with Benny curled against him, watching the sun rise over the Rockies. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. At the hospital, while doctors treated Joanna's broken ribs and Carter's sprained ankle, FBI agents began the process of dismantling Rodriguez's entire operation. The evidence Joanna had gathered, combined with testimony from Deputy Chen and the other officers who'd turned, painted a picture of corruption that went back nearly 2 decades. The news broke that evening. Every channel ran the story of the brave officer who'd worked undercover for 2 years to expose the conspiracy that killed her husband, the single father and war veteran who'd risked everything to protect her, and the canine dog who'd survived against all odds to help bring justice. The story went viral. National news picked it up. By the end of the week, Carter couldn't go anywhere without being recognized, without people wanting to shake his hand to tell him he was a hero. But he didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a father who'd done what any father would do. Protect his child. Do what was right. 3 months later, on a warm April morning, Carter stood in his farmhouse kitchen, making pancakes while Benny set the table. It was a Saturday, which meant Joanna was coming over for breakfast. She'd been doing that a lot lately, ever since she'd gotten out of the hospital and started her new job with the FBI's corruption task force. Bruno, because everyone still called him that. Now the name had stuck, was lying in front of the fireplace, his head on his paws, content and calm. The nightmares that used to make him whimper in his sleep had faded. The dog was healing just like all of them were healing. The doorbell rang, and Benny ran to answer it. Carter heard Joanna's laugh, heard his son's excited chatter about the science project he'd won an award for, heard Bruno's happy bark as he greeted his former partner. She came into the kitchen, carrying a box of donuts. Her smile bright, despite the fading scars on her face from the crash. She was wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her FBI uniform, her hair loose around her shoulders. "Morning," she said softly. "Morning." Carter replied, feeling that familiar warmth that had been growing between them over the past few months. "Coffee." "Please." They moved around each other easily now, comfortable in the rhythm they'd developed. Joanna poured coffee while Carter flipped pancakes. Benny set out plates and chattering about his week. Bruno wandered over to beg for scraps. It felt like family. Later after breakfast, they all went for a walk around the property. The snow had long since melted, replaced by green grass and wildflowers. The farmhouse had been repaired, the bullet holes patched, the broken windows replaced. The storm shelter remained, though a reminder of the longest night of their lives. They stood there looking at it, the 4 of them, man, woman, boy, and dog. "I can't believe we hid in there for hours," Benny said. "I can't believe we survived," Joanna added. Carter put his arm around his son's shoulders, looked at the woman who'd become such an important part of their lives, and smiled. "We survived because we had each other. Because we didn't give up." "Because you didn't give up," Joanna corrected. "You could have turned me in. Could have saved yourself and Benny. Nobody would have blamed you." "Yeah, they would have. Benny would have. I would have." Carter met her eyes. Besides, Sarah always said the measure of a person is what they do when nobody's watching, when it's hard, when it costs them something. She was right. She usually was. They started walking back toward the house, Bruno running ahead, Benny chasing after him. Joanna walked close to Carter, close enough that their hands brushed. "Carter," she said quietly. "Yeah. I've been thinking. About the future. About what comes next." His heart beat faster. "What about it?" "The FBI has offered me a permanent position in Denver. I could stay. Put down roots. Maybe—" She hesitated. "Maybe spend more time here, if that would be okay." Carter stopped walking, turned to face her. "Joanna Hayes, nothing would make me happier." She smiled that beautiful smile that lit up her whole face and took his hand. Not as a fellow survivor anymore. As something more. Benny came running back, Bruno at his heels. "Dad, can we show Aunt Jo the new trail we found, the one that goes to the creek?" "Aunt Jo." Joanna raised an eyebrow. "Well, you're here all the time," Benny said with perfect kid logic. "And you're like family. So you're Aunt Jo." Joanna's eyes filled with tears. "I would be honored to be Aunt Jo." They spent the rest of the morning exploring the trails, Benny leading the way with the confidence of a kid who'd faced down real danger and come out stronger. Bruno ran ahead, barking at squirrels, no longer the traumatized rescue dog, but a happy family pet who just happened to be a trained police canine. And Carter walked with Joanna, their hands linked, talking about everything and nothing about the past and the future, and all the possibilities that lay ahead. That night, after Joanna had gone home and Benny was asleep upstairs, Carter sat on his porch, looking at the stars. Bruno came and sat beside him, resting his head on Carter's knee. "We did okay, didn't we, boy?" Carter said softly, stroking the dog's head. "We saved her. We did what David wanted. We did what Sarah would have wanted." Bruno's tail thumped against the porch boards. Carter thought about that night 3 months ago, about the blizzard and the overturned cruiser and the choice he'd made to help a stranger. He thought about everything that had come from that one decision, the danger, the fear, the fighting, and yes, the loss when Rodriguez had fallen in that ravine. But he also thought about what they'd gained. Justice for David Hayes, a future for Joanna, safety for his son, a second chance at happiness for all of them. Sarah had been right. The measure of a person was what they did when it was hard, when it cost them something, when it would be easier to walk away. Carter had chosen to stay, to fight, to protect. And in doing that, he'd found something he thought he'd lost when Sarah died. He'd found purpose. He'd found family. He'd found hope. The stars wheeled overhead, infinite and eternal, and somewhere in the house behind him, his son slept safely in his bed. Tomorrow, Joanna would come for breakfast again. Bruno would bark at the mailman. Benny would work on his science project. Life would go on, normal and precious and hard-won. Carter stood up, patted Bruno's head one more time, and went inside. He checked on Benny, pulled the blanket up around his sleeping son, kissed his forehead. Then he went to his own room, to his own bed, and for the first time in 3 years, he slept without nightmares. Because heroes aren't the ones who carry guns or wear badges or fight in foreign wars. Heroes are the ones who open their doors when a stranger needs help, who stand up when it would be easier to look away, who choose to protect what's right, even when it costs them everything. Heroes are fathers who teach their sons that courage isn't the absence of fear, but doing the right thing anyway. Heroes are women who spend 2 years seeking justice for their murdered husbands. Heroes are dogs who overcome trauma to protect the people they love. And sometimes, if you're lucky, if you're brave, if you refuse to give up when everything is dark and cold and terrifying. Those heroes find each other in the storm and build something beautiful from the wreckage.